I just want you to know that I can't preach from up there. I got to be down here amongst you guys. So here we go. Hi, Ed.
Hi, Bill.
I am trying to wrap my head around this simple little incident. And the reason I am here preaching to you today rather than out in Manhattan in a strange foreign land is that Pastor Curtis is in Florida where it's 90 degrees. And I am here. I could have gone to the conference myself for him and brought the information back. But apparently the senior pastor didn't see it that way, so he left me in the snow. We'll just have to put up with it, Ed. You know what? We're just going to have to put up with it. But I'm really, seriously, I'm happy to be here today. It's been many, many, many weeks since I've been here, being able to preach and be able to share with you. If some of you are visitors and new people here, you don't know me. I'm Bill. I'm your executive pastor here for the Bridge Ministries. And it's just a privilege and an honor to be here today. Pastor Curtis asked me to preach out of the Gospel of John for the continuation of the miracles of Jesus Christ. And I thought, wow, that's really good. That's going to be fun. We'll just hang right in there on John until I read it. I said, nah, I can't preach that one. Can't do that one because it's missing some stuff. And so I went back to the gospel accounts, and I went over to Mark, and I went over to Matthew, and I went over to Luke, and I looked at this whole incident of water walking. Well, a couple of things that I discovered. Luke didn't even mention it. John and Mark never addressed Peter walking on the water at all. They talked about Jesus walking on the water, but never about that step of faith into the middle of the storm. And so I know Deanna's up here recording this, and it's going to be on the internet, and Pastor Curtis is going to bust me when he gets back. But I am not staying with John 6th chapter. We're moving over to the Gospel of Matthew, the 14th chapter. Take a look starting at about verse 22. And this is the way as we blend all these stories together, as we blend those Gospels, it kind of goes something like this. We have just come off a beautiful mountaintop experience, the feeding of 5,000. It was a miracle because it was performed with very little. There were some questions asked to the disciples about how you going to do this, and it all unfolded. You know that story. So we've done the feeding of the 5,000. Now it's getting a little later in the afternoon, and Jesus says that, I really need some time to go away by myself to refresh and to pray. What I want you guys to do is get in that boat and head over on the other side of the shore. I'll meet you on the other side of the lake. Well, in the midst of that whole process, everything was going fine and dandy until the disciples got about halfway across the lake, 3.5 miles out in the lake, and they run headlong into a huge storm. And that's what we want to deal with. There's where we want to go. This is what we want to talk about. And I want you to plug one premise into the back of your head, one premise into the back of your mind, something to ponder, to think about. And it's simply this. Because of the power, because of the presence of Jesus Christ in our life, we can accomplish things that would be absolutely impossible left to ourselves. If we want to walk on the water, my brothers and sisters, we have to get out of the boat. And that's a lesson that Peter learned in the midst of one of the greatest storms of his life. So let's just think about that for a minute. A huge ministry, a mountaintop experience. The feeding of the 5,000. Jesus needs to recoup. He needs some time to pray. Sends the disciples across to the other shore. And that's going to be an undertaking. It's going to be a 7-mile trip. It's going to be some work for them. It's getting late in the evening, and off they go. But there's some things that I think that we'll discover, and I believe we already know and understand, that sometimes there are storms in our life. They're not of our making. We fall victim to them. But sometimes We understand that storms are sure to come. They're going to happen. We're going to struggle with them. They're going to be in our lives. There's no way around them. Sometimes we just get caught in the middle of them. And true to our scripture, have you ever noticed in your journey, in your life experience, have you ever really discovered, if you take a step back and we look at it and analyze it, have you ever noticed that sometimes some of the most severe storms that you and I have to face in our life come right after a mountaintop experience? And sometimes that's just the way it happens. That's the way it goes. But in the midst of that storm, coming off that mountaintop experience, into the boat and facing the storm, sometimes you and I feel like we're the only ones in that boat. We're the only one tugging on the oar. We're the only one that's experiencing this. But the truth is, you're not. You're not. So we need to take a look at the disciples. We need to look at that story. Sometimes I've often wondered, they're coming off this mountaintop experience, they're out in the boat, and maybe they feel pretty secure. Maybe they're pretty comfortable in that boat for a while. But one of the things that I discovered when I looked and dealt into those scriptures, and I challenge you to go back, and I want you to look at Matthew and Mark and John, and one of the things that you'll discover is the disciples are somewhat agitated. They're asking some hard questions. Some of them were kind of still upset, trying to figure out this whole feeding of the 5,000 thing. In one of the versions, it says their heart was hardened. Wow. Let's not get caught in that category of having hardened hearts at the miracle of Christ when he touches lives. We can be guilty of that. And some of the storms in our life will just escalate it. Different sermon for a different time. I hope I get to come back to it someday. Jesus sends them out into unknown waters. Hey guys, go across the lake. I'll meet you here meet you over there in a little while. And off they go. Right in the middle of everything, he sends them off. Do you find it interesting that these guys load into a boat and set off across the lake? You know what they're doing? They're obeying Jesus Christ. They're following his commands. They're following his will. Get in the boat, go across the lake, and I'll meet you. And right in the middle of obeying his will, fulfilling his commands, where do they find themselves? Right in the middle of the greatest storm they've ever faced in their entire life. Do you think, is there a possibility that some of the storms that we have in the middle of our life can come about because of our obedience to the will and the commands of Christ? That's exactly where these guys were. They were not out of his will. They were in his will, doing what he told them to do. And now they're fighting for their lives, for their very survival. They were walking in obedience, doing what they were commanded. Ever found yourself there, my brothers and sisters? See, I want you to understand something about storms as we face them. I think there's basically two types of storms that we face in our journey of faith. There are storms of correction, which Jonah found himself in the middle of. And there's storms of perfection, which the disciples found themselves in the middle of. But I also want you to think about something else. Here's the disciples out on the boat trying to do what they're supposed to do in the will of God. But it's not the first time they faced a storm. But this one's quite different than the other one. Because the first time they faced a storm, Jesus was with them in the boat. Oh, he might have been asleep in the back, but he was with them. This time, facing this storm, he was nowhere around. At least that's what they thought. There's something that made me back up and think a little bit as I was kind of painting this whole picture in my mind and where we were going to go and how we were going to get there. And a simple thought kind of just entered into my mind is, wow, they're out there because they're in the will of God. They're in the will of God. They're doing what He commanded them to do. How did they end up in this storm? Have you ever thought, just for a moment, that at one time in your life, some of you, not all of you, but some of you were told by some individual, well, you just give your life to Christ. Just surrender to His will. Just turn your life over to Him. And it's going to be smooth sailing from here on out. It's all going to be through rose-colored glasses. It's all going to be good. How many of you would say they lied to you? How many of us have just lived life and found out that those people said, oh, just surrender it to Christ, they lied. There's no two ways about it. And by the way, Jesus never promised that, did He? I don't think so. You see, we're on a journey. We're on a journey of faith. And we know and understand from our life experience it's not all smooth sailing, whether we're Christ followers or not. We get in the middle of storms. But on our ship of faith, there's something that we've all discovered. Where's my sister? Terry, who did I steal this from? What was the last name? Shed. Okay, Terry looked it up for me. I couldn't remember who I stole this from. But this illustration is so true. And it goes something like this. Ships are meant for sailing. They are to be tested in the open waters. They are not meant to be left in safe, snug harbors. We're to be out sailing in our journey of faith. It does us no good in a safe, snug harbor. Our lives need to be tested by the storms that we're going to face. Maybe you and I don't know where you're at right now, but maybe we together, we're in a storm. We're fighting for our life. We're faced with a storm that's so big and such of a great magnitude, we don't know if we're going to survive it. But we're there because we have obeyed Jesus Christ and we're walking in His commands. Could that just be the truth right now for what you're facing? But there's one thing that we need to remember. He's brought us this far. He's not going to abandon us. He's going to take us the rest of the way. But there's something else I need to say about storms. And I talked to George right here, and I talked to Kurt, our elder emeritus, right after church today, and they were both in the Navy. They served, and I was talking about the storms, and they said, oh, absolutely true. Because what I wanted to say is that sometimes the storms that we encounter are so big, so severe, that no amount of life experience can ever prepare us for it. I said, I've been on a couple of fairly good sized boats. That one time, when I was out, the entire bow went underwater, under a wave. That gets real exciting real quick. But think about these guys. They're in the midst of their biggest storm. They're seasoned fishermen. They've been on the water. And they've never seen anything like this. And they're scared to death. So some of you are probably already asking, why didn't they just turn around? Why didn't they just go back to shore? And George and Kurt knew immediately why they couldn't. Because the storm was so big and so severe, the waves were so mighty, if they would have turned their boat, if they would have turned the ship, it would have capsized them. It would have tipped them right over on their head. And they probably would have all died. Sometimes in the midst of our storms, my brothers and sisters, we have no other alternative than to continue to press forward. No matter how big the waves are, no matter how great the storm is, we have no other choice. We have to move forward. We cannot veer off course. If we try to turn around, we'll capsize. There's no going back, no turning back, no turning around. It's full steam forward. No other choice. And I believe that many of us in this room have experienced that truth with some of the storms that you have faced. No choice in the matter. No turning around. And that's exactly the way life is sometimes. So in broad brushstrokes, painting your mind right now, what happened just a little over 2,000 years ago? Think about the magnitude of this storm. How many of you have watched the movie A Perfect Storm? Oh, hey, you guys did better than first service. Can you remember what happened when those two storms collided? True story. One of the biggest storms that's ever been on the Atlantic. Can you think back in your mind what those guys on that little fishing boat did? They could not turn back. They had to keep going forward. Forward. So maybe right now, you guys, some of you right in this room right now might be facing the perfect storm. No turning around. No going back. You got to keep pressing forward. The disciples were battered. They were beaten. They were exhausted. They were afraid. Fear had them by the throat. They were afraid they were going to die. It's sometime between 3 and 6. They've been struggling all night. But you know what I find interesting? It's dark out. There's a storm on the ocean. The lightning's flashing. The clouds are low. The wind is blowing. They're 3 to 3.5 miles out in the middle of nowhere. And the scriptures say that Jesus was aware of their situation. That's a miracle in itself. How many of you can see 3.5 miles in the dark in the middle of a storm? That's what I thought, not one of us. But Jesus was aware of their situation. And that's a lesson that you and I need to learn. That no matter what we're facing, no matter what storm we're fighting, no matter what's happening to us, Jesus knows exactly what's going on in your life at that very moment. He knows exactly what dangers we're going to face. And all too often, my brothers and sisters, we simply forget that He knows. And He's concerned. And He's aware of all we're going through. But right in the middle of our deepest, darkest struggles and storms of our life, Jesus comes to us. Comes to us. So often we're just trying to stay afloat, keep our nose above the waterline. Too often we're like the disciples. We can't go forward, we can't go backwards. We're struggling just to stay afloat. How many of you have been right there? Totally exhausted, worn out, expended all our resources, and we're just trying to survive. And here comes Jesus. We feel helpless, overwhelmed, overpowered, out of hope. And we're listening to that voice of fear. That liar that's whispering in our ear. So we see Jesus coming to the disciples, walking on the water. See, do you catch the point there, you guys? I know you've probably heard 151 sermons on water walking. But do you catch the point? It's a simple point. Jesus is absolutely and totally victorious over our greatest fear. Victorious over our greatest fear. What did the disciples fear the most? The water. They were afraid of drowning. Did you notice that Jesus was walking on what they feared the most? It was under his feet. And Jesus will walk on your greatest fear. He will pin it down with his heel. He'll destroy it. Now, I want you to keep your theology straight here, because when it comes to this storm, I would tell you what my theology tells me is that Jesus didn't cause this storm. He may have allowed it, but he also used it. But did you notice another thing about this storm? Jesus didn't instantly fix the dilemma that the disciples were in. He saw, he knew, he understood, he came, but he didn't instantly fix it. And I think that's a lesson that all of us need to learn sometimes. Sometimes Jesus takes his own time. So in the midst of our greatest struggles, we can learn, we can grow, we can mature in our journey of faith. And here's the truth of the matter. This is a fact, that Jesus is far more interested in developing our faith than he is relieving our distress. Do we believe that? Okay, I'm going to say that one more time, and we'll see if we can get an amen out of the back of this, okay? Jesus is far more interested in developing our faith than he is relieving our distress. Amen? Amen? Some of you. I'm going to have to send you to amen school. Holy cow. Amen, guys? Amen. There we go. Right in the middle of our biggest storm, right in the middle of our greatest struggle, Jesus comes walking on the water. He's the master of whatever we fear. He's walking on the whitecaps like they were concrete, like they were pavement. And he's showing his disciples by his action, by walking on that which they feared the most, that he is in absolute, total control situation. Amen? Amen. That's how it works in our life. He's going to walk over our greatest fears, and he's in absolute control. Do you trust him, is the question. Do you see in your greatest storm that Jesus is coming to rescue you? And that he has power and authority over the very thing that you fear the most. And he's walking over it like it's pavement. What's your greatest fear? What's your greatest fear? Fear of failure? You're going to listen to the liar? Fear of death? You're going to live forever. Are you listening to the liar? Loneliness? Rejection? Fill in the blank. Jesus is already victorious over it. And if you look through the storm that you're facing, you'll see Jesus walking to you over the top of your greatest fear. Did you notice that when Jesus came to the disciples, all of their energy, all of their strength was expended. It was gone. They've been trying to do it on their own. Ever been there? Yeah, all of us have. See, that's a lesson for us. Is when we're exhausted, when we're out of energy, when we're wore out, we can see Jesus coming to us. They'd been in that storm for about, 6, 8 hours. They were done in. They were overwhelmed. They were exhausted. All of their strength was gone. And that's when Jesus will come to us, is when we let go. And all of our strength is gone. When we trust Him to rescue us. Notice what happens next. Jesus is walking through the storm, walking on the water like it's pavements. And He calls out to the disciples. And he lets them know that it's Him. They thought they saw a ghost. They thought they were going to drown. They thought they were dead. They were scared to death, exhausted, worn out, and full of fear. And Jesus calls out and He lets them know that He is there. You know what I found in the Scriptures when I read this? I found something very interesting. In one of the accounts, it says that Jesus came walking to the disciples out in the middle of the storm as if He were going to walk by. That's interesting. Maybe this is a two-way street. Because in one account, Jesus says, "Hey guys, it's me, I'm here." On one account, it says that He's going to walk by. Well, maybe that just means that Jesus is there, and if we're going to get in contact with Him, if we need Jesus, guess what we need to do? Maybe we need to call out to Jesus. I'm in trouble here. I need you. I know you're there. Rescue me. I find the words that Jesus used when He approached the disciples in the boat to be very, very interesting. It's a simple little Greek word, it's just one word. It's jam-packed with meaning. In the NIV and the New American Standard Bible, it says, "Take courage, take courage." In the Revised Standard Version, it says, "Take heart, take heart." The Greek word that's used there is therio. Therio. And what it literally means is to have courage, to have a boldness, to show confidence. There's a powerful phrase that's used here. This little word has a tendency to paint broad brushstrokes. It's not a casual greeting at all. Actually, it's an authoritative blessing. It is also used as a very strong commandment. Show some courage, guys. Be bold. Show some confidence here in the middle of your storm. That's what Jesus says. He comes walking to the disciples and He says, "Hey, guys, show some confidence here." This is what we would say in... is it Montanan or is it Montana-ese? I think it's Montanan. This is what we would say. Rub some dirt in it and cowboy up. That's the bottom line. Rub some dirt in it, cowboy up. Be bold, be strong. Hey, we sing a song, don't we? Be bold, be strong, have some courage. It's the whole idea that's being painted here is to deliberately make up our mind to reject all of the doom and gloom that's coming at us and rely upon the strength of Jesus Christ in our darkest times and situations. And I find that interesting. He summed it all up with one little word: be bold. Be bold. Don't listen to fear. Fear is a liar. And it will destroy us. To the disciples, it looked hopeless. And then Jesus shows up on the scene. I don't know where you're at right now, my brothers and sisters. I don't know what kind of storms you're facing. I don't know what you're looking at. I don't know what Satan's thrown at you. I don't know what the world's thrown at you. It may look hopeless to you. But whatever your storm is, whatever struggle you're facing, you have total access to the grace and the power and the mercy and the courage of Jesus Christ. Thareo, be bold. Cowboy up. Look what's happening, my brothers and sisters. It's 3 o'clock. And desperation and exhaustion reign. It's 4 o'clock and praise and exaltation come. 3 o'clock it's anguish and worry. 4 o'clock is awe and worship. Have you learned the secret of your faith? Have you learned the great secret of your faith? Because this is what it is, my brothers and sisters. Right now, this very moment in your life, it may be 3 o'clock. But guess what? 4 o'clock's coming. And we need to live accordingly. In the power and the grace and the mercy and the strength and the courage of Jesus Christ. Take a look at what's happening in that boat at that very moment. They're all convinced that they're going to die. Jesus is saying, come on, cowboy up, take some courage here. They think they're seeing a ghost. Then the greeting and the command comes. And then all of a sudden we know the rest of that story, that simple little story between Peter and Jesus. Did you ever notice there's a big if there? Peter wasn't quite sure at that particular moment. And he says, if it is you, Lord, tell me to come. He wants to make sure. If it is you, Lord, tell me to come. No great sermon. Not a lot of superfluous words. Come. I don't know about you, but I'm painted this picture in my mind. 3.5 miles out in the middle of this small little ocean, the waves are crashing over the top of the boat. It's about to sink. It's filling with water. The guys are scared to death. The wind's blowing, lightning's flashing, and Jesus says, come. I don't think it was a real easy task for Peter to step out of that boat. He probably got bounced around, slammed on the deck, picked up, thrown around, and had to work to get out of the boat. It was no easy task. And by the way, he's going to step out of the only security that the rest of the guys think they have? Is it security at all? Really? It could sink at any time. It could have broke apart. We had a group of guys that said, hey, you know what? It's safer to stay in here. And Peter said, no, I think it's safer out there. And he stepped out of the boat. Could I just so humbly suggest that the crowd may not always be right? Probably been a lot easier to stay in the boat. But Peter stepped out in faith. In the midst of fear, whispering in your ear and lying to you, sometimes our faith causes us to take huge risks. Huge risks. You think about stepping out of that boat. We're going to jump out of the frying pan right into the fire. We're going to leave the only safety that we perceive to go out here. Faith, when we put it into practice, sometimes causes us to take some huge risks. Are you willing to step out? Sometimes we're just like Peter. We allow fear, that liar, to whisper in our ear, and we take our eyes off of Jesus. What happened? Somebody tell me when when Peter took his eyes off Jesus. What happened? He sank. Ever been there, done that? Mm-hmm. Yep. Because I've listened to fear whispering in my ear. But Jesus is going to take us by the hand. He's going to lift us up. And He's going to take us back. He's going to calm the storms of our life. But I just want you to know, sometimes He doesn't calm those storms. Sometimes He allows us to ride them out so that we may grow. So I want to tie a bow on this for you guys. I hope that we've learned some important lessons about storms that come into our lives and how Jesus can work in and through them. That He is the master of all that we fear. And that we can put our absolute total faith and trust in Him. I hope we've learned that He will ask us to get out of our comfort zone. That He will ask us to step out of our security blankets. He will tell us to cowboy up, to take courage. You remember that old saying that came from one of my Western heroes? Courage is nothing more than being scared to death and saddling up anyway. He may not calm your storm, but He can calm you in the middle of it. He can help you grow and mature in your journey of faith. So I want to leave you with a simple question today. Are you really trusting Jesus? In the middle of whatever storm you're in right now, are you really trusting Jesus? Are you ready to step out of the boat? Don't listen to the fear in your life. That fear is a liar. Trust in Christ. Step out of the boat. Amen.